Thank you.
I'll call to order a work session of Goodyear City Council. Roll call. Mayor Kavanaugh is in Washington, D.C., representing the City of Goodyear at the National League of Cities and Towns, and I believe Joanne also had a conflict with this evening's work session that was previously scheduled months in advance before we decided to change the calendar and have this evening's meeting. With that, I'll roll right into well, real quick, procedurally, just want to take one thing out of order here. If nobody has any objections, when we get to item B, I'd like to pass the gavel to Mr. Sousa, because I'm going to bow out of the ADOT discussion, given the client working relationship that I have.
It's just a work session.
I'm still going to bow out of it, sir. So, with that, I'll do that when we get to item B. But item A, council will receive a presentation from staff information and options regarding the abandoned shopping carts. Anna, you've got the floor.
Thank
Go by
you.
Anna or Anna?
Anna.
Anna, you've got the floor. All right.
Good evening, Vice Mayor Antoniak and members of the council. Recently, staff has received requests by council to look into the issue of abandoned shopping carts. Thus, the purpose of this work session is for staff to provide information and options regarding abandoned shopping carts and to get council direction on how to address this issue. As you all most likely know, as the city and number of commercial developments grow, so too will the number of abandoned shopping carts that we see along roadways, near bus stops, and in landscaped areas. Abandoned carts are potential hazards for pedestrians and drivers and are eyesores that can contribute to blight in our community. Although some departments have dealt with this issue in the past and few are working to address it today, the city has not yet comprehensively addressed this issue. With our growth, it is appropriate that the city discuss this issue at this time, consider the options, and develop a comprehensive approach if the council so desires. For a brief background on this topic, in 2000, the Arizona Revised State Statute 44-1799 was adopted. This statute provides requirements for cart owners, limits for use by the public, and restrictions on retrieval. For instance, businesses must mark their carts with 5 forms of identification, requiring that signs be affixed to carts that identify owners of the carts, provide procedures for removal, inform the public that unauthorized possession is in violation of the law, and list a phone number and address for returning the cart. Also, the statute prohibits certain shopping cart activity, including that it is unlawful to remove the cart from the premise, alter, convert, or tamper with the cart, and possess a cart with serial numbers removed. Finally, this statute also gives cities, towns, and counties certain impound rights. Prior to a municipality removing a cart and collecting fees if it is off a business premise, the city must tag the cart and leave it in this location for 3 days after the notification before it can retrieve this cart. Also, retrieved carts must be held at an impound lot that is located within the city limits, that is open for at least 6 hours every work week, and there are many more details that go along with this. Even though the statute attempts to improve abandoned shopping cart problems, there are still some shortcomings in the law. For instance, after a city notifies owners of abandoned shopping carts, obviously it can still legally reside within the public view for up to 3 days. Cities cannot force businesses to retrieve these carts once they have impounded them, and unless the owner of a cart is unknown, the city does not have clear rights to dispose of the carts they take into their possession. Carts located on private property, such as in retention basins, also cannot be removed. One business that is working to address the issue of abandoned shopping carts across Arizona is the Arizona Cart Retrieval Company. This company provides service statewide, and it contracts with businesses to retrieve carts. Businesses determine how often the Arizona Cart Retrieval does sweeps across the communities, along with public complaints. The public can call into 1-800-THE-CART, which is operated by Valley Grocers and retailers. However, the Arizona Cart Retrieval Service can only pick up carts owned by businesses that it contracts with. For instance, if there's a group of 6 carts and it only contracts with 2 of the cart's owners, it has to leave the other 4 within public view. Also, typically, this retrieval company bases its returns of the carts on their location that they're found. So, for instance, the Arizona Cart Retrieval Company does contract with our Super Walmart, but it does not contract with the Avondale Walmart. So if Walmart carts are found in historic Goodyear, for example, they would base their cart location off of who owns the carts. So they would not be able to pick them up because they do not contract with the Avondale Walmart. Stores in Goodyear that contract with Arizona Cart Retrieval include Family Dollar, Fry's Marketplace, Safeway, and Super Walmart. Although these businesses do contract with Arizona Cart Retrieval, you can see there are a number of companies here that do not, including Target, Lowe's, Ross's, Best Buy, Home Depot, Toys R Us, Babies R Us, 99-cent only store, Michael's, Linens and Things, and Circuit City. While most Valley cities do not have an abandoned shopping cart policy, some are taking a proactive approach. For instance, a public awareness method is used by Mesa. They promote the Arizona Cart Retrieval service on their city website, and El Mirage does a similar program where it also promotes it on the FACTS webpage of the website. Due to the increasing problem with abandoned shopping carts littering the community, Phoenix recently contracted with Arizona Cart Retrieval. Through their direct contract, the Arizona Cart Retrieval concentrates its efforts in a 180 square mile radius of Phoenix, historically known for being the most impacted by abandoned shopping carts. So the Arizona Cart Retrieval service goes to this 180 square mile radius, does sweeps throughout the entire community, and takes those carts directly to the businesses, gives them a bill for $20, and has the city bill them. The retrieval in the remaining 336 square miles of Phoenix is on a complaint-only basis when citizens call in. Peoria is the first city within the valley to require anti-theft devices on all carts. The City of Peoria ordinance was adopted October 16, 2007. Any business commencing operation after January 1st of this year must have restricted devices on all carts. Businesses in operation before January 1st of this year have until January 1st of 2013 to be in compliance. These anti-theft devices... 2013. So they have 5 years to come into compliance. These anti-theft devices can range from inexpensive poles that are tall enough to prevent a shopping cart from physically exiting the building to high-tech wheel locking devices. To give you a little bit of background on the wheel locking devices, on the shopping carts, they install a front wheel that is equipped with sensors. Then a cable is embedded around the perimeter of the site, which emits a low-frequency radio signal. They also install an anti-tilt bar on one of the rear cart wheels to prevent the cart from being tipped back when the front wheel locks. When the cart is pushed past the cable, the low-frequency radio signal locks the front cart wheel, not allowing the cart to be pushed any further. Only a special remote used by employees can unlock the wheel. While these anti-theft devices may prevent most carts from leaving a business's premises, it takes maintenance and vigilance to keep them effective. Stores that have this system still report losses at times because the batteries that power the wheels can expire, sensor wheels can become dirty and prevent the locking system from being triggered, and the cable system and radio frequency can be interrupted. Additionally, these high-tech anti-theft devices are expensive for retailers. A local food city reported that it outfitted less than 200 of their carts with wheel locking devices for around $25,000 to $30,000 in initial costs. And this figure does not include regular maintenance, which can vary by the number of carts, the usage, and the diligence of the store. The loss of shopping carts is a significant issue to many Valley retailers as well as municipalities. Shopping carts owned by retailers in Goodyear can range in cost anywhere from $120 to $400 per cart. With no specific policy or programs in place to address the issue of abandoned shopping carts, some potential options that the city could consider may be a public awareness campaign such as MESA that works to inform Goodyear citizens who they can call when they see an abandoned shopping cart. It can also work to inform retailers of options concerning shopping cart retrieval, perhaps publicize the Arizona Cart Retrieval phone number or another phone number that citizens can call, and develop a comprehensive non-regulatory approach. Another option that the city could consider would be to contract with the Arizona Cart Retrieval Service to pick up all carts regardless of ownership, like the city of Phoenix did. With this option, the city could ensure that all carts are retrieved regardless of ownership. However, this program would remove carts much more efficiently, but also require a great deal more of the city's resources, including staff time, efforts, billing services, impoundment, and the cost to contract with the ACR. Phoenix's costs were about $350,000 per year for 4 years. Their square mile area was much larger than here, but depending on if they'd be willing or not to contract with Goodyear, that would be a possibility. One other option the city can consider would be an ordinance to require all businesses with shopping carts to utilize anti-theft devices, like the city of Peoria. This could greatly reduce the number of abandoned shopping carts. However, the program would require a great deal more of the city's resources, again, staff time and money, Peoria did have to hire an additional staff person to oversee this program with billing and impoundment, things like that, and result in significant expenses to the businesses. The effectiveness of this could also be questioned. Peoria's program has only been in existence for just a few months, so we don't know the long-term effectiveness of this. Some of the underlying questions that should be considered while evaluating these options include how effective would any option be over the long and short term, what are the fiscal impacts to the city, what would be the level of community support or opposition to any option, and would pilot programs for community awareness be appropriate before enactment of more restrictive regulatory measures. And then I'll leave you with this. This is a recent flyer. Neighborhood Services has recently been promoting the Arizona Cart Retrieval Service, and they have been distributing this at some HOA and neighborhood alliance meetings. They have listed on there the Arizona Cart Retrieval Service phone number, as well as phone numbers for the businesses that do not contract, so they can call them, leave messages that abandoned carts have been out on the streets. But again, this is just a preliminary effort by Neighborhood Services. They've passed these out at a few meetings. And also, the police department is also very interested in this issue, and they're interested in beginning a program to help address the shopping cart issue. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have or open it for discussion.
I'll go Brenda first.
Well, is it considered abandoned when there's no person attached to it? Because I've actually seen people leaving the store and they continue right on out into the street, and I guess they're headed home somewhere, and they've got a lot of things in their cart. So I guess it's not abandoned at that moment in time. It will be abandoned when they get their things into the house.
Correct. It's abandoned when there's no person attached to it. It is, as the statute designates, it is illegal it is unlawful to remove a cart from the premise, but stores are very reluctant to pursue this, as they don't want to legally pursue their customers for shopping.
It looks bad, doesn't it?
Yes, it looks very bad.
And especially if you end up with an irate customer.
Yes.
Right out there on the street, right?
And often the people who remove the carts from the premises do not have the financial means to pay the fees.
Yeah. No, I think it's good information. It's good to get us caught up on the statutes, because we did have a kind of a shopping cart presentation September of 2006 or something. But a lot of things have happened since then, and it sounds like the cities have gotten serious about it, and so should we.
Only that, just the only thing I can say is, I guess we first need to make some kind of, work on some kind of an awareness program. I think that would, I don't know what you do beyond that, because of the cost of something like this for the individual business, and if the city took it on, it'd just be very, very expensive. If $350,000 is what, of course, that's the city of Phoenix, it might be less for us, but I don't think it's worth that. I do feel that there ought to be maybe signs put in the shopping carts, more awareness to the fact that in the stores themselves, that shopping carts should not leave the shopping center area, and just make the public more aware of what's going on. At least I'd like to see that tried first. Least expensive.
Well, first of all, I think we get our intergov and go down to the legislature and change this law. It's a weak law. We've got lots of problems in all the cities. While they sit back there and give people 3 days to view a cart that might be almost in their backyard, I find it unforgivable. So that's my first goal, to see if we can get this law tightened up, because this is ridiculous. Second of all, we've had lots of complaints on shopping carts. It isn't, we cannot take it lightly. I know we're going through a budget crunch right now, but we need to come up with some more active events than just sending a brochure out or a flyer out. And I don't know what it's going to be. I certainly would like to be sure we're monitoring how it is with Peoria, to find out how worthwhile that is. I did mention when I first got on council, everybody kind of laughed, but in Europe, it takes a quarter to get a shopping cart, and they lock them up. You put your quarter in, you go shop. If you want that quarter back, you got to push it back into the gate again to get your quarter back. It's amazing what people think of a quarter. they want that quarter back. In fact, you know, they almost get irate when they have some malfunction, they can't get the quarter out. I would like you to check into that kind of service to see the cost of that. That doesn't take the repair service that the other one does. But I just don't think it's a subject we can just say, well, it's going to cost too much for the cities, and we'll just kind of gloss over this. I don't think we can. I think we have to get really active on this. And you know, I don't have any great ideas except my quarter idea. But and again, we're having a budget crunch. But I still think we should monitor this and try to find some ways to help this. And I think Peoria, good on them. Put it on the business. It's their cart. It's their business. They're making the dollar off the groceries. So make them responsible.
Jim?
Nothing disturbs me worse than graffiti, but this is second in my challenge. You see them laying, all along Litchfield Road and in other areas of the city, and it's unsightly and it reduces the value of the neighborhoods. There's no question about it. In the long run, it gives a bad image of the city of Goodyear. I just believe that we should move in the direction of finding some solution to this problem. And I like the idea of putting the onus really on the retailer. If this can't be resolved by the city by going to the public and pleading with them and making them aware of why they should return these cars to the place that they received it from. And I talked to my wife and several other people about this, and their complaint basically is this, is that the retailer does not provide enough islands on their properties to place the cart after you loaded your groceries into your car and then move the cart to an appropriate area. I believe that we should get to the retailers and ask them to provide more spaces for the return of the cart itself. Other than that, I commend you on the recommendations that you made. Some of them are a little, we rely on the individual too much. And that's the reason we're faced with this problem. And it's going to get worse. As the city grows, the more population comes in, more stores come into the city, into more areas in the city, it is going to get worse. So we have to nip this in the bud, as I see it. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thanks. We've got another round going. I can tell everybody's chomping at the bit. Let me go to Brenda.
Okay, Brenda, go ahead. Question from that.
It's interesting because most of these happen during the day. I mean, if people it isn't like that they try to hide it by sneaking it at night and taking a shopping cart. I guess on any kind of a flyer or brochures, or I'm kind of with Frank on going with trying to get the word out first that there's going to be a campaign. That's kind of a warning when you start doing that we're paying attention. Do you think the stores look at it, the retail places look at it as stealing? Are people stealing? And the chief says yes. So, but on that brochure that you showed us as an example, there wasn't anything on there that mentioned anything about, kind of like a theft.
Chief, while you're Chief, while you're addressing that, would you address what your folks might do if they were seeing somebody strolling down the street with a cart?
Sure, Vice Mayor, members of the council. What we have to have in a crime, and Anna talked about this, is you have to have a victim who's willing to be a victim. If the stores say we don't want to prosecute in that, then you don't have a crime without a victim.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so therein lies the difficulty for enforcing under the theft statutes. We have made efforts to contact the major grocery stores, the two Walmarts in our city, the Super Center and then the Neighborhood Center on Indian School, the two Safeways and Fry's, and talk to them about their shopping carts. And on these things, we try to emphasize this costs you a lot of money to have these shopping carts there, and for someone to take them from your property, leave them abandoned somewhere, not only are you losing the ability to have that, for your customers, but that's your property laying out there unsecured. So we tried to work with them in that regard, but also, having the ability for our officers see them out there, they can contact dispatch and that number can be called, that cart retrieval, to at least start that process sooner. Part of it is just how do we track all of these? Certainly I don't know that we want or have the luxury of taking police reports on them right now when we see them abandoned, but clearly from just some type of tracking with the cart retrieval folks, that they're at least being advised of that, and we can have some record through our CAD system or something, but making sure that if someone does call in, that our dispatchers are prepared to give them information on how they can report that themselves if they choose to do that.
Okay, so right after we say we're on our way home or something, and we see someone walking with a cart and they're taken off, at that point in time, it's probably going to be abandoned. But
Most likely, but where will it be abandoned at?
Right.
Yeah.
okay, so we really I know we don't have the street power to do that. So I guess
Well, and at least having the officers who are during their patrols, if they see them, that they can at least notify this cart retrieval and let them know that their carts are out there. So.
Right. And so it wouldn't do any good if, say, you saw someone doing that. You would not go up and say, this is stealing.
Not without a victim willing to say, I want to prosecute for this.
That's right.
Boy, we have a problem, don't we?
Well, we potentially can have a problem. I think that, as we start developing, commercial retail centers and right adjacent to residential areas, there's a convenience issue. People don't want to drive, but they still need to get their items back to the house, and, we could have a problem. But educating the homeowner associations, the neighborhood groups, those things, very, very important tool to do. Now we have multiple people calling in, and maybe that will give more attention to our cause here.
Of course, they still have to wait 3 days and look at it before it can be picked up. Is that right?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No. So
So along with that, this thing, question I have along with that, if it's abandoned on the property, it's not abandoned.
Not on
It's
the
in the
property.
shopping center.
Correct.
So having more places to put the carts doesn't solve the problem. More cubby holes to put a cart in. I mean, you can get through with a shopping cart. There are some shopping centers that do not even have a place to put the Smart and Final and Trader Joe's up there. You have to go right back to the store and put it in. There are no places out by the shopping. So, no, but I'm just saying that's an example. Those are coming, and there are places where, so if the shop's out, if the cart is out in the parking lot, it's not considered abandoned.
Correct. Not on their property. No.
On their property, yeah. Yeah, I don't see how you can enforce anything beyond that.
Right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention, I've noticed that some stores make money off their carts because they have advertisement on them.
Sure.
So it would be a simple way for the stores to pay for whatever device we pass to put on the cart, because they could actually retrieve their money from their advertisement.
That's probably a question for Anna to.
So
But yeah, that probably
another
is.
approach.
Great way to try to bridge yourself out of
Absolutely, yeah.
the microphone there, Chief.
You want to sit down and
Go ahead, and then maybe we can wrap this up.
Yeah. I said we can't solve it.
One more thought
No way.
along your lines, Chief, is that this can get worse. Particularly with the cost of gasoline.
Sure.
It's $3.15 today. And people are going to walk to the shopping center.
Sure.
And they're going to walk home, and they're going to have something to carry their groceries or their merchandise home with. This now becomes a problem, as you pointed out, to the neighborhood. So it's going to get increasingly worse if we don't nip it in the bud.
And to that, again, the educational component for a lot of the homeowner associations, they could be very creative too, and they could have groups of folks who volunteer to bring them back to the stores. We just need to make sure that people are willing to do those kinds of things and help with the solution to those things, and certainly we can encourage those types of creativities. However we can. Yeah.
Good
Will it
place.
work all the time? I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows?
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. And I think I'm definitely hearing consensus on the public awareness aspect of the presentation. Would it be fair to say that we probably should monitor Peoria's efforts over the next 12 months and maybe
I also would like to see them look into that other device.
the devices?
Yeah, with the coin.
Yes, and I wanted to mention as well, we were just discussing this, we went off, our options were based off of what other cities have been doing, so we can also look into exploring the idea of requiring businesses to contract with the ACR directly instead of the city contract with the ACR, so we can look into that as well and see if maybe Peoria or Phoenix has tried that in the past. So we can
That's a
see
good
it.
idea.
One more question. You mentioned earlier, and about the, if a shopping cart's down in a retainer basin or something, it can't be retrieved?
If that's on private property, not. The business can be notified to retrieve it, but that if it's on private property.
So the store themselves couldn't send someone over and pull it out of that?
Well, if it's on their property, or well, if it's their cart, they can go retrieve it, but.
But we as a public agency can't step foot on private property in order to retrieve.
Yeah, that's what you were saying.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand that. Okay, thank you.
I would be curious, Peoria was able to put in their ordinance, and they stepped in front, or they put a more stricter role on the carts than state statute does. Is there something that prohibits us, or does the state statute prohibit us from changing that 3 days to 2 days or 1 day in order to tighten up the time period?
It must be left out for 3 days.
It must be like
Yes.
that. Okay, so it goes.
They must be
the
notified
language-
in writing 3 days in advance.
Okay. Another question you may not be able to answer, but maybe some other folks in the room could. If I'm a proactive resident and I'm sick and tired of carts, we have a bulk trash pickup. What prohibits me as a private resident taking that cart out of the private property in the retention basin that I pay HOA fees for and putting it on my curb and writing trash on it? As a creative measure, if I'm sick and tired of carts. Anybody?
I kind of like that one, Bob.
How about that one?
You probably can't answer that one, so I'll look over here. I mean, in Canyon Trails, we have a very active resident that is sick and tired of carts.
Absolutely. More than one.
Quite honestly, I have no culpability or responsibility in it. I mean, if I'm a policing resident, I can throw that out on my curb. Trash staff's going to come by. They're just going to look at it. Now that it's in the public right-of-way, what's going to
Now we got two
happen?
people doing it coming up.
This is why I drove my high school teachers crazy.
But Vice Mayor, I would suspect that in part that person now is in violation of the law because they're in the illegal possession of the cart the same way that the person who took it out of the store is.
I have a feeling you might say.
Good answer.
Cart vigilantes.
What's that?
It's a cart vigilantes.
I had to ask. I got to give some folks some ideas on how they deal with the carts. I mean, it's okay. So I'm hearing obviously support right now for a non-regulatory approach. We want the so use in focus, use Paulo's office, put the number out there maybe on a regular basis or on the FAQs, and then report back to us on
our
the.
intergov, talking to some legislature to see what we can come up with. Let's not drop it there. Let's stir the pot a little bit.
I'd be curious. I mean, I'd be curious to know if there's any flexibility in that. Maybe you ought to. Anybody else?
Well, I think, basically what they've done is taken the problem out of our hands and have restricted us so greatly with the law that there's very little we can do on how to try to gerrymander the law to try to get around it.
Peoria's found a creative workaround.
Yeah,
That's what it sounds like to me, and maybe
Why should
it is an expensive workaround. That's when you're talking about a business with a margin of 1%.
Because the law is
it just
so
doesn't-
weak, it punishes the cities. Again, the cities pay for what the state can't do. So I still am.
Your legislature passes laws, but there's no way, they don't think about how to enforce them. Some cities do that too. We're guilty of that too at times. So if this happens, you pass a law because you think it's a good thing. Well, you don't even think about how you're going to enforce it, and it just passes. So I wouldn't depend on the legislature.
Well, I think it's good for us to remind them that the law they passed isn't sufficient. I'm done. Thanks.
We keep track of all the complaints we get in the citizen complaint system. So maybe when you come back, I assume we do.
We get a copy of those, don't we?
Right. So maybe when you come back to us in 12 months after Peoria's been doing theirs, and then we can even look at our numbers as to how many complaints we're getting within City Hall in time. Is that something that you see?
Okay.
How about before and
Well,
after?
try to. I'm not asking you to get up, Gail. No, I'm not asking. I want to move on. But when you come back
Just
to
real
us,
quick,
It
Linda
is
Dillard
fine.
gets most of those calls, and she does track them, so,
okay.
Yeah.
So we do have numbers inside our system.
yeah, we could produce numbers.
Be curious to know that.
Well, if we do a campaign, maybe it would be good to see if the number, really bring it to our attention that the numbers dropped off or increased because we put these flyers out or whatever you guys are going to come up with.
HOAs need to work with the
In good
businesses.
shape? You got enough to go on?
Definitely.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Amber. With that, I'll move on to item B. The council received a status update on the Interstate 10 widening project from Cerevel Avenue to Loop 101. And as I stated earlier, I'm going to ask Mr. Sousa to chair this portion of the meeting, and I'll come back for item C.
I'd ask the clerk to record the time that the vice mayor recused himself from this issue. The next order of business is the status of Interstate 10, the widening project from Cerevel Avenue to Loop 101, the Agua Fria Freeway. And to do that is Luke Gilbert, our traffic engineer. Luke, it's your time.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. We've invited members of the ADOT I-10 project team to discuss this project with you and answer any questions you might have. Now, I'd like to turn this over to Brock Barnhart with ADOT to begin this presentation.
Thank you, Luke, members of the council. Appreciate you allowing us to come out this afternoon to provide you a briefing of the I-10 projects. Essentially, I'll be covering all the way from I-17 to the SR-85. I know some of this information is back on your packets that you have in front of you are fairly thick, so I'm going to try to make it through my presentation as quickly as possible to allow some additional time for questions and comments.
Brock, why would you want to bring I-17 in since that doesn't
It's essentially, Mr. Councilmember, it's essentially the I-10 projects from I-17 out to State Route 85. So it's all covering the I-10 corridor.
All right, go ahead.
Like I said, I'm going to try to make it through this as briefly as possible so we can allow to focus more on what's happening right now. To set the agenda tonight, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the purpose and need of the projects, go over the program construction projects for I-10, and then also just briefly go over the public involvement efforts that we've made already in this corridor. This project, or a series of these projects, are part of the Regional Transportation Plan. It was a half-cent sales tax that was voted on and approved by voters in 2004. The purpose and need, I think, speaks for itself. It's just with a substantial amount of growth out in the West Valley, the widening enhancement of I-10 along with several other regional transportation projects are essentially needed out here to create traffic flow both in the east and east-west direction. The I-10 West expansion projects encompass the following projects. The ones of major emphasis would be the Bullard Avenue traffic interchange. It's nearing completion, along with the Cerevel Avenue to 101 project median widening. Also the Cerevel to Dysart, which would be outside widening of Interstate 10, and then the Verrado Way to Cerevel Avenue project. This just shows a map of those particular projects and the timing and dates of each project, and also just kind of depicting what will be happening as part of those projects. First with the Bullard Avenue project, this project again is nearly wrapping up. It started in June of 2007, and again we're looking for completion sometime this spring. You should have before you some pictures of just the process of the Bullard Avenue project. I'll kind of scroll through these fairly quickly. The aesthetics on Bullard Avenue was kind of a great partnership established with city staff and ADOT, and also we did have some council members out on site to take a look at those aesthetics, so I think it was a successful partnership that we want to continue throughout these I-10 projects as well. The next project, in fact, the one that is currently going on right now, is the Sayreville Avenue to Loop 101 project. This project is essentially adding one general purpose lane and one high occupancy lane in each direction within the median of I-10. To follow that would be the Sayreville Avenue to Dysart Road project. This essentially would be the outside widening. It would be adding one general purpose lane and one auxiliary lane in each direction adjacent or the outside of Interstate 10. This is just a typical section of what the freeway would look like between Dysart Road and the Loop 101 area. This is just for your reference of what currently exists and what will be there in the future. Really what's going to trail the median widening project from 101 to Sayreville would be the Verrado Way to Sayreville Avenue project. This would be also median widening, adding one general purpose lane in each direction, again within the median of I-10. Then that outside widening would then follow after this one had started. Oops. The Citrus Road to Sayreville really is essentially just creating a realignment of I-10 for future construction of the Loop 303 I-10 connection. So it's bypassing I-10. So when we do get there to establish the system-to-system traffic interchange, the I-10 will be rerouted and allow room to construct the 303 interchange. State route, kind of looking further out, just SR 85 to Verrado Way. This would be adding one general purpose lane in each direction, again within the median of I-10. Again, that's further out, it's 2023. Again, to discuss the I-17 to Loop 101, again, this is a study that's currently underway to evaluate additional lanes within the median of Interstate 10 as well. And this is further out. Looks like it could go to construction as soon as 2010. Other additional I-17 improvements would be to traffic interchanges at Perryville Road and also the El Mirage Road traffic interchange. Extensive public involvement throughout the projects as far as them being in the study phase and through the design phase. Just briefly touch on that. Several meetings have been held in regards to all of these projects. This is kind of our approach during construction. We're here tonight to keep the members of the council well involved and up to speed on what's going on I-10. We're continuing to work with city staff, building that relationship. We want to hear that feedback to work together to minimize impacts during construction. And also we're going to have extensive outreach to stakeholders through electronic newsletters and so forth. So we're really gearing up to, we know it's going to be kind of an important corridor in the next few years. So we're kind of geared up with the approach we have here. For additional information, you can always visit our website to get immediate information on any projects that we have ongoing throughout the valley. And at this time, I'd like to just take any questions or concerns that you may have. Just like to also address that there's going to be road closures, restrictions during this process, and there's going to be some impacts. There's always the payoff, to get to the final goal, and that's to, again, create better traffic flow on Interstate 10. So there will be some impacts. Again, it's our goal to work with city staff to try to minimize those impacts. But again, any questions or comments you may have.
Since that was your last statement on working with staff, how are you going to handle the local street closures? The burden that it brings to the commercial industry, the stores and industrial. And so how do you handle that? How is that coordination between ADOT and our staff?
Madam Councilmember, we do have the city staff involved in our weekly construction meetings. We're trying to have the contractor come to us with a look-ahead type schedule that can give city staff enough time to kind of evaluate the impacts to the surface streets in the area. That way we can work together to try to adjust signal timing, place signs, notify the public of what's going to be happening. Again, we're just really created two forums for the city staff to be engaged in, and that's the weekly construction meetings and then transportation system meetings that are more higher level stakeholder meetings to be able to get as much information as we can from the contractor to prepare for those restrictions.
Because it seems like things come up the schedules change and they're last minute, like it was supposed to have been started last week, but now it was this week on the road. So those type of things.
A great deal of that is just you have so many different contractors in the same area. What was predicated as far as the cancellation of the first weekend's work was the work that has taken place on Bullard and removing concrete barriers. It's just kind of trying to establish both of their schedules and then to also move forward. It's the dynamics of construction. Things do change fairly quickly. It's very fast paced. Again, it's our goal to ensure that city staff is at those meetings and kind of staying engaged in that process, staying informed. If they're not at those meetings, it's ADOT stands to ensure that, city staff and intergovs are informed of what's going on at all times. Our goal is to eliminate the element of surprise, essentially.
Okay, Dick?
Brendan?
The arterial streets, and this is kind of one for all the guys and you, we count on those when there's a traffic backup on I-10. Of course, we now expect there to be even more of a traffic backup if that's possible. I'm on there a lot, and it always kind of surprises me. It looks like it's moving, and then all of a sudden it's stopped. But now, even getting off on our arterial streets, we're not quite ready. The interchanges aren't quite ready, and so everything is kind of slowing up. I'm kind of looking over in that corner to see if anybody's going to raise their hand and jump up and say, I think what we would like to know, because we're probably just a little sample of all the citizens that are out there, and it's kind of disturbing when we take the route off the interstate and we get stopped, just like we had been on the interstate. And so I found that it's just as easy for me to stay on I-10. So what do we usually use an expected time for, say, to do 2-mile work? Is that 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or do they do a whole lot of one thing at a time and then they come back and start digging up again? Or, I mean, how is that done? Maybe that would help us be more sympathetic to the cause.
Sure. Madam Councilwoman, as far as what we anticipate construction phasing to be at this time, what we experienced last weekend was essentially just setting up the work zone. There will be restrictions to I-10 to establish the work zones and to shift traffic more towards the shoulder so they can establish a work zone in the median. There will be some impacts to I-10. I would say the main focus is that we're not impacting I-10 during peak travel times. We're going to be maintaining 2 lanes of traffic at all times. There could be some overnight restrictions, some weekend restrictions. Again, really, we're focused on working with city staff to take a look at if there's a chance there is detours along the city streets, that we're prepared for that. We can take care of the community relations approach, but we really need the technical expertise from our traffic engineers, not only from ADOT but the city, to work together on what is the best solution to minimize impacts for the traveling public. There will be some impacts, although, to the surface streets. As I mentioned, there'll be lane restrictions on a freeway, so really there's no need to detour off onto the surface streets, but there will be times that underneath at the crossroad crossings under I-10 that there will be some closures. What's been brought to our attention so far is that as they construct the false work to establish the bridge structures, there will be closures, and I think what they're anticipating is that there'll be a Monday through Friday full closure of crossroads, reopen those on the weekends, and then again close those down again. But that's the feedback that we need to get from city staff. They know their city's the best. Right. We need to get that feedback to see if we can pass anything along to the contractor that may minimize some inconvenience to the local jurisdictions.
Right. And plenty of warning. I mean, sometimes it's not just because it's in the newspaper. Those signs that kind of catch your attention on the road that give you the warning that Litchfield Road and Dysart, I think, were both closed for a while this past weekend, and so you don't know exactly how far you're going to have to backtrack if you try to get someplace. And some warnings like that would really help us.
There's also been kind of a larger scope effort that it's called the MAG ITS committee. I did brief them as well. Essentially, the Maricopa County Department of Transportation will take the lead for all local jurisdictions, and really our focus is on trying to identify what the cities or local jurisdictions have in relation to construction and what ADOT will have in relation to construction, trying to get those all posted so we're not working in conflict with one another if there is major restrictions on the freeways, that we're not sending folks onto restricted surface streets. So that effort, I believe Maricopa Department of Transportation is taking the lead to enter those restrictions into our system, and that really is kind of the purpose of those traffic system management meetings, is to have all these agencies come together to look at the bigger picture and to be prepared for those types of things, and to kind of, again, work together, put our strategic plan together from a community relations standpoint and a technical standpoint, that we're going to minimize the impacts for the traveling public.
All right. That sounds good, especially the community relations part, because we're the ones that usually end up with a lot of those calls. So
Just to touch on that, we do have a weekly construction newsletter that's going to go out weekly to inform the public. That list essentially is a couple thousand people. I would encourage council, if you do have a constituency list that you would like us to send that to as well, we can work with city staff to get that information out. I know we've been working with city PIO. The information is being posted on the website. So really, we just want to work in partnership to make sure that folks are being informed out in the West Valley.
Okay, thank you.
Frank?
Yeah, we answered some of this, but just making certain that those closures do coordinate with the street construction, because if they're working on something on the streets, we can't have both streets and the arterials closed and the highway closed also. So that's very important, that part of it. And then I had some questions. You mentioned you're going to put center lanes in all the way from I-17. Will that take that center median out?
Currently, right now, I believe there's 50 feet of right-of-way within the median from I-17 to the Loop 101.
Well, I'm on the RPTA board in Valley Metro, and that, I thought, that piece I thought was identified as for light rail in the future.
In conjunction, ADOT is always thinking multimodal, looking for alternate modes of transportation. I believe we are in discussions with Metro to identify what is the most viable option of transportation within that median area. We're obviously interested in hearing what they have to say or what their plans are. I do know that they're studying that corridor.
Okay, so they are still in study, because that is up to that point, and then Glendale wants to take it from there up to the 101, or up along the 101 to take it to the stadium. And we really need that, because this impacts us over on this side. For us to use 101 when there's a game going on, it would be nice to have that light rail in place to take care of a lot of that load. So I'm concerned that just make certain you're working with our PTA on that, if you would. And then for information for everyone, if you don't know this, our PTA, Valley Metro, has come to Goodyear, and there is a regular bus that comes to the corner of Litchfield Road and McDowell is the bus stop, and that bus stop is there every hour, on the hour, from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, and it'll take you over to Desert Sky, where you can catch other buses and go on to other places in the city. As a matter of fact, you can catch bus 17 over there and go all the way to Scottsdale. And it's so now doesn't help the travelers that are going through to California and so forth, but it does for people going downtown. We need to get more information out on that, because that bus now is a regular bus 7 days a week, and that goes, as I said, on the hour. That goes all the way to into Phoenix and connects with other buses. Other than that, that's all I have.
Thank you. My concern basically is, are we going to, once the project is complete on I-10 from Dysart to Cerebral, are we going to experience within this community the same thing we're experiencing now with backlog of traffic? Because when we get to Cerebral now, once this is completed, we're going to have lanes coming down again, like we're having now on Litchfield Road. The traffic coming together, and that's what's giving us the backup. Do you see that happening, or do you think that there'll be enough mileage between the new construction to kind of ease that?
Mr. Councilmember, I would always anticipate those impacts as far as the narrowing down from the east as you're moving west. Is that there is a bottleneck there until we really complete those projects and catch up to it in a sense of what is already currently built in the eastern portion near the 101 connection. I would anticipate that, but during construction there will be the same amount of lanes open that currently exists out there on I-10 today. The configuration of that traffic may be shifted to the outside or to the inside, although.
But I mean, once it's constructed, once the construction is completed, once these lanes are done, and the project is true, are we going to experience the same thing we're experiencing at Cerebral as we're experiencing right now at Litchfield?
Essentially, what we'll be doing is really upgrading all the way to Dysart what currently exists right now between Dysart and the 101. So really, we're just kind of marching down to the west. So essentially, we'll be adding additional lanes to Dysart. adding more lanes to Sayreville, only one more in certain cases, all the way out to Verrado Way. So to answer your question, I believe that's what's going to exist is you're going to kind of still have that kind of a bottleneck, but we're trying to service more volume coming from the Verrado Way into Phoenix with what's funded right now.
And that'll be 209 will be from Verrado further west then, right?
Correct. The next scheduled, or what would soon be advertising, is the Verrado Way to Sayreville inside widening, and shortly behind that would be early 2009, mid 2009. We would have the outside widening from Dysart to Sayreville.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions?
I just want to say that we're glad to see it starting.
I think all-
We're happy you're here briefing
yeah.
briefing us on it, and it's actually happening. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luke.
Exciting part.
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, please, for the council, for the utilities and for
With that, we'll move on to item C. Larry, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you, and good evening. In our past few discussions that we've had, we've talked a little bit about the revenues, how the revenues are coming in to the city, how they're coming in for this fiscal year, how they're coming in for next fiscal year. We've talked a little bit about the operating expenditures, how we're doing on those. And we talked last week about the funding on the capital improvement plan and what that looks like in relationship to the revenues. And all of this discussion is leading to the council advance scheduled March 31st, where we're going to be asking input on a number of the policy questions involved in the budget process. But tonight, what we're going to talk about is fund balance, and what this really is intended to do is to help you put together the last three discussions to see how it all fits in the total budget environment. So first, what I want to talk about is the anticipated fund balance at the end of this budget year, 2008. I'm going to zoom that out just a little so everything can be seen on there. And I'm not good at getting them straight, so everyone just tilt your head a little to the side and you can see it better. This represents the funding for the general fund only. There are other operating funds of the City of Goodyear, such as the utilities, the sanitation, the highway user revenue fund, which is the gas taxes, and the street department. We've done a similar analysis of those, but I'm going to keep the discussion simply on the general fund to help see how it comes together. And that's also where the sales tax issues that we've been dealing with exist. In the general fund budget for the year that we're currently in, we projected a beginning fund balance of $55.6 million. That projection is actually done somewhere in about late April within the budget process, where we make those final estimates, and there's still 2 years left of the previous fiscal year to go, so we're having to make estimates at that point in time. The actual adopted budget, or the actual audit report came in and showed that we actually had about $57.5 million as of that year. So we actually exceeded what we expected in our budget by about $1.8 million. In revenues, general fund revenues for the year, we projected about $86.8 million, about $87 million for revenues for this current year.
And as you've seen in previous discussions, we've dropped that down to about $79 million. That shows us short about $8 million. You'll recall in previous discussions that we have talked about a $12 million shortage in construction, or in sales tax, both construction and not. That's only the sales tax elements of our general fund revenues. We have a number of other sources of revenue within the general fund. Those revenues overall are above our expectations, and so therefore the expected revenues are not as low as the $12 million. But to be honest with you, there's one big number that makes $3.5 million of that, and that is the expected receipt of $3.5 million from Newland on the Cotton Lane Bridge, which required, before they paid us, required us to meet certain conditions. We have now met. That money's been released. We may have it by now, or we would have it sometime soon. I think I saw a question.
So minus from the 12.
It is included in this 78.7 number, and therefore that reduces this number from the
So we
12.
went from 12 to 8 because of that factor.
That was a big variable there, yes. Have I lost?
No, I'm trying to compare my memory to the numbers that you showed previously.
Actually,
For some reason, I recall 89 million and 77 million.
yes, very good. The 89 million included the revenues from the Sonoran Valley that I took out for this presentation, because as I flowed it the whole way through, I was ending up with strange numbers at the bottom. So I took the revenue and the expenditure out that we had in the budget for that down south. All of that is a wash to us, so I left it out in this discussion. Previous discussion, I had that number in. So that's where that one came from.
We're a pass-through for that money.
Yes, and I'm treating it for this purpose net of that number. The 77...
You dropped from 89 to 86 on the original budget.
Yes.
The revised estimates...
The revised
went
estimate...
from 77 up to 78.6.
And the revised estimate included the 3.5 this time that did not include in my previous discussion, but I did pull that money out that was estimated at that time.
That's the Newland money.
Pardon me?
The Newland money.
No, the 3.5 million is the money for the Cotton Lane Bridge. That is correct. So your recollection is good. And with that, I can reconcile each of those, although I don't have all of that with me if we need any further. But I appreciate those questions on that.
Your articulation of the changes is good. I wouldn't mind seeing it.
Sure.
As follow-up, just so I can comprehend it
Absolutely.
a little better. I don't know if anybody else cares to or not, but I...
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. In expenditures, the budget, and these numbers I've revised significantly from previous estimate, but understand this, all the changes that I'm giving you now are accounting type changes in these numbers, not changes in estimates. The $112 million is considerably higher if you looked in the adopted budget, and that is because we consider the contingency of $20 million for that purpose. We consider that a budgeted expenditure. For this presentation, I took that out so that we're looking at what we expected to spend. And so this year we expected to spend about $112 million. We're on pace to spend $107 million this year, which will leave us at about $5.5 million variance. I want to remind you that when we had the discussion a couple of sessions ago on the operating expenditures, all of these estimates for the expenditures were based simply on mathematical calculations. Budget staff and all of the departments are working very hard at revising estimates to see where we're coming in, and by the end of this week, we will have some revised numbers. For this purpose, It is the same calculations that we have used historically. Really, nothing is changing in what I've told you in the last couple of meetings. The transfers in and out represent transfers that we make either to other departments. Generally, those are either operating subsidies or capital subsidies. They also do include transfers in. Those would be primarily from the utilities that do reimburse us for some of the billing costs and other administrative costs. Although we transfer out more to the utilities often than what we transfer in. We've done the same type of a calculation in each of those utilities, and right now, based again on those mathematical calculations of the expenditures through the 6-month average, that we are estimating not having to transfer in about $3.1 million less than what we have in the budget.
Now, that will be at July 1st.
That is correct. This is
So
our
these-
estimate for the 12 months.
Okay, so
yes.
these figures, this is what you estimate that we will spend to the end of our budget year.
Yes, these are
Not
total
up to the-
12-month numbers.
Okay.
That is correct.
All right.
They're estimated, but they are
Yes, I
12-month
understand.
numbers. Okay. So the result of that is if you add the beginning fund balance and the revenues, subtract out the expenditures and the transfers out, you end up with an ending fund balance that we anticipated in the budget of almost $23 million. The breakdown of that budget is $20 million for the contingency reserve, almost $2.5 million for the funded depreciation, and about $500,000 that was undesignated surplus in this budget. The revised estimates that we're presenting to you and that we have been presenting to you show the reserve remaining intact, the contingency reserve and the funded depreciation, and the undesignated at about $3 million. That results in a total variance right now in the budget of $2.5 million. With that, I am labeling that, and I hope you will accept for this purpose that that is what I'm describing as a break even. That's 2.5% of our budget, and we're doing this all on estimates. So that's what we're doing right now, is talking about that we, and I've said the last couple of times, I believe throughout the year we can get through without dipping into this reserve. Well, we're not, by this $3 million, we're not dipping into the reserve.
So that should remain there unless we have, a catastrophe like an earthquake or a flood or something.
That's correct. As we keep moving through my estimates, what I have committed to you is that we will keep you informed as to how we're moving on that number.
All right.
Okay?
I felt an earthquake since I lived in the Bay Area.
Well, he's toned it down to emergency now.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of examples.
That was,
Remind me, how do you, the original budget, I can't talk tonight. The original budget, the beginning fund balance is 55.5.
Right.
Presumably
Estimated.
that was July 1st of 2007.
That is correct. That was the estimate.
How do we discover another 1.8 million again?
Because this calculation was made in April of 2007, actually in March to April.
Okay, so that 57.4 and change is what you had on July 1.
This came right out of the audit report. That is correct. And this information was not available until well after we adopted the budget. Normally, we don't close out those numbers to have them fairly accurate until about August, which is well after we adopt. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, with that, to help you get a little frame of reference on these numbers, the next sheet that I have, because really, when you start talking these numbers and talk our overall financial condition, it's always better if you have a comparison. So what I wanted to show you was how the 2007 budget, oh boy, and I just noticed I had some number changes in here that don't even add up here. So
I thought that was accounting.
no, this is definitely not. These things added up this morning, and
Oh,
as
I
I looked
see.
at them after they got printed out, there was a change that I have to reconcile, and I apologize for that. but I will go through the basis of this. The beginning fund balance in the 2007 budget, remember that year has been well closed now, that ended June 30th of 2007, was estimated at $38.2 million. The audited number for that year came in at $53.9 million. So there was a $15 million variance that year that came in. Okay?
It's unusual.
Yes, and part of what we talked about last year was wanting to tighten up in our estimates. Well, we picked a really good year to tighten up in our estimates when they all dropped drastically from what our estimates were. But we really wanted to do a more accurate assessment of our estimates this year, and I think we have done a better job. The revenues were projected at about $69 million and came in at about $91 million for a positive variance of about $22 million. The expenditures actually came in about $6 million over budget, and that $6 million was heightened by the $18 million on the Cotton Lane Bridge that we had to pay at that time to cover those costs. The rest of the budget, as we discussed before, came in better than that. And then the fund balances came in about $5.6 million better. I apologize because these numbers changed and I truly can't remember why, but the true net of these numbers, the $32 million that I showed down in the bottom, is the number of the variance that particular year that we had of new money that we were in effect able to roll over to the next year's budget. And I will get all of you a corrected schedule on this.
Is that $5 million difference what you rolled into our contingency fund to bring it from 15 to 20? By any chance?
That is exactly what it is. It was a change that this changed this number up here. This was correct, but I still need to find out why the math didn't flow through. But you're right, that was a change. When I built this schedule, I started doing this bottom part off the top of my head, and I had it at 20. Then I looked at the documentation, and it was 15. But I still need to revise the schedule so that this number equals this number.
But for the public's consumption, in case they're paying attention, it's 15.
Okay, and very good catch on that. That is where the numbers came from. Okay. So, with that, I want to show you a very quick projection of what next year's budget looks like. I'm going to compare it to the adopted budget that we have for this year, and then show the changes by line item from year to year. Beginning fund balance, we started with about $55.6 million, and that was the original estimate included in the budget. Right now, our original estimate on that is about $25.4 million, so that by itself is $30 million less. Most of that $30 million, in fact, virtually all of that $30 million went into this year's capital improvement plan.
What makes up that $30 million? Is it developer impact fees? Is it
this number?
Yeah, I mean that's a big shift, a big change.
What makes that up is basically this column on this presentation here, where it's a combination that our previous year's balance was lower, and this, and that's the primary cause of the change. The comparison, though, is the reason those two numbers don't equal exactly is the comparison of the budgeted versus the audited numbers, or the estimate versus the following year when it flows through. Very simply, I used this number for this comparison, but when you actually compare dollar to dollar, this number would be used for that purpose. So I wasn't to tie all of the three schedules together nearly as much as to show a more global look of how it's going to impact our budget this year.
So this is kind of like a little snapshot to show kind of where we're headed.
That's correct.
We know the numbers are all going to change. So
They are changing
okay.
rapidly.
Yeah.
And the revenues we've talked about, we're expecting those to be down. The sources of those include the sales tax revenues that we've already talked about, as well as a reduction in permit revenues, building permits, and those fees, which have held fairly strong this year, and they'll still hold fairly strong next year because of commercial, but not nearly at the levels they have been.
And that includes construction tax.
That includes construction as well as all other sales tax. That is correct.
Larry, pause for a second, because I don't know that I'm following you. Your beginning fund balance is from presumably the year before.
Budget to budget.
Okay. I'm trying to put my finger on why a 30 million. Is anybody else with me?
Right.
Am I lost here?
Right. No, I understand.
Did I miss something between
I
the
understand.
this and the it and the this and the that? Because I'm trying to put my finger on
Okay.
the difference between
If I
30
would have
million.
put this number at the 57,
Which this number? Define. Hold on. Slow down, Larry. Real quick.
this number,
55 million.
this 55,
Right.
right
Put
here.
that 57.
If
If I put that at
next-
57 million,
Right.
because now what we're talking about was actual numbers as opposed to two different estimates at two different points in time.
Got it.
Then I think that number gets a lot closer to this 30 million, because you're 57, or to the 32 million that you're trying to see on this schedule, because the 57 and the 25 will get you there at about 32 here.
All right.
Okay? And the reason I'm going just when we prepared the budget on this schedule, I'm not trying to flow through the resources from year to year. I'm trying to flow through instead how we put the budget together.
That's why I kind of use the word, it's like a snapshot. You said,
That's
here's where we
correct.
are right now.
That's correct.
Got it.
Okay? And these are good questions, by the way. And I appreciate your calling me on a couple of these, that we get those out, because that is the type of dialogue that I appreciate as we're going through this budget. So the revenues that we talked about, we're expecting to be down this next year by about $13 million. The expenditures and the transfers out, therefore, have to be down to be able to offset that. We cannot spend money that we do not have. And so where these expenditures drop the most in these years is where most of the previous capital or fund balance went to, which is capital improvement programs and one-time projects. Yes, sir.
Explain how you come up with the 112 mil and the,
That number there?
Yeah.
That 112 million includes our adopted budget for the general fund for this year, and I did not include these two numbers in that number. I also did not include the budgeted expenditures directly related to the annexation down south. So I pulled out about $25 million from this cost so that I could have a comparable net cost within the budget. I pulled them out of the revenues and the expenditures. The reason I wanted to pull this 20 million out is to be able to show you an isolated line item how we're not spending that money.
Yeah. Okay.
In the budget, we show it as an expenditure. We never intend to expend it, but we show it as an expenditure for that emergency. But we don't intend to, so here I'm showing it as a reserve so that it reflects with you that it is being set aside and not being spent.
It's there, but.
So that's the reason I'm showing it down below. Okay?
That's right.
Okay? So the $73 million is really a number that we back into. And this is the number that we're going to spend a lot of time talking on, and that we spent a little time on the capital improvements plan last week, but we're going to spend more time talking in a couple weeks on priorities and so forth. So the bottom line with all of that is that, again, the difference is approximately $2.4 million. That $2.4 million is not allocated in this year's budget, but for that's 2.5%. That's our estimate, so I haven't really plowed all of that back in. If it were incorporated, it would go up into the expenditures, into one-time expenditures and capital.
Right.
As our estimates get refined, we'll be closer on these numbers, and we would definitely include that in the budget process. That's all I have. Take any more questions you may have.
Questions, folks?
Hmm.
No?
That's good.
I do. On the, go figure. On the expenditures, on that sheet you just had up there, can you put that one back up for me, Eddie?
Mm-hmm.
The last one? The last one?
Yeah,
No, that's not
that
the right
last sheet you had up there.
Yep, that's not the right one, it's this one. No? Okay, I've only got 3 sheets here, so
Thought I
it
was
can't
the
be
only one
that
getting
hard to get
confused
the right
tonight,
one.
Larry. Come on.
The anticipated fund balance.
There we go.
Yeah, the
With all the red on it.
what's all the red?
That's the one I like to call.
It's
in
the
and
cash
of
flow
money.
out. The $73.2 million expenditure presumably covers all of our O&M
Yes.
plus some capital, and that's what you're gonna depict to us in the
At
next
the end of
session,
it.
is you're gonna detail out that 73.
Actually, I have kind of detailed this, I believe, in the previous discussions, the CIP portion, anyway, I did last week. And yes, as we move forward and as we present the budget, you'll get considerably more detail of the breakdown of that between operating and so forth. When we talked about the operating expenditures,
How much of that keeps the city in its current operating capacity? Of that 73.2, 50, is it?
it's closer to 60 million, general fund for the operating. Closer to. I have to get you, I can get you an exact number. of what
60
that is.
includes no CIP.
No CIP, virtually no capital. That is truly the operating costs, the recurring costs of the
That's the
budget.
meat and potatoes.
Yes.
And then, you may have said this in previous work sessions, but I'm needing to recollect. So let's go with the presumption that, or the assumption that 60 million of the 73 is operating expenses. We're not changing any employee status or anything like that. We've got 13 million. How much of that is encumbered in already ongoing capital projects would be a question I would ask. You don't have to answer now, but it would be a question I'll be seeking answers on over the next couple of weeks.
Actually, in the capital improvement plan, one of the challenges in the capital improvement plan right now is that as the committee is working through their whole process, most of the funding available for the next couple years, if not out for 3 or 4 years, is already committed on that type of funding that you're actually contractually committed, such as for the 303 right-of-way acquisition, those types of commitments that have been made.
Most of that 13 million is already
yes,
committed?
is already committed, that's correct.
But you're putting it in there because it's assumed we're expending it.
No, we've already obligated to it.
It's obligated.
But-
It's obligated.
Money
Yes.
not there.
Yeah, but it's not discretionary is the question.
Right,
That's
yeah.
already committed, that's correct. Very little will be discretionary on the capital side, and I think, that's my speculation from the discussion, but that's what we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
I will tell you, what would be helpful for me in the future, I don't know if anybody else sees this, but to carry this out rather
Sure.
than have it on 3 sheets.
Yeah, I
Just
would,
it's
much easier
tough to
to
keep
follow.
track of you going back and forth between sheets, so, and then maybe from here on out, apples to apples would be helpful.
That's always, no, I understand that's always the challenge when you're talking on budget with actual numbers. What I was really trying to convey with that, and that's a very fair comment, we spent some time discussing that, really trying to convey that we do estimates, such as I've done now, and there's a period of time before we adopt that budget. And in the past, those estimates have been so conservative that we've had some excess money roll in, and last year, that added about $15 million to your
And I
budget.
think we questioned you, where did that money come from?
Exactly.
So I think he's protecting himself.
What I'm
He's
doing
showing
is-
you where that money,
I'm showing you that in the past, as everything was growing, those estimates have been a source that have allowed us to do extra things at the last minute as we've adopted the budget.
Historically, though, that's been Goodyear's philosophy. We've always done that, and since I've been on the council, it's been, let's be very conservative about this because we don't know about the future.
Correct.
And because we plan using the last year rather than planning ahead and hoping something else comes in, as other cities do, and then I'm questioned by other city council members, how do you do that? Well, I said, what you do is plan backwards. Take what you spent instead of planning ahead and saying, well, this, because we've already developed this much more, there'll be that much more coming in. Don't do that because there's no certainty to that.
Correct. Okay?
Good deal.
Okay, thank you.
More dialogue. Thank you, Larry. Moving on, information. Any council members have reports on current events?
Yeah, I have one. Anyway, I handed all the council members a copy of the letter that was filed with our attorney in November of 2006 on what I was doing in my financials, and so I wish to take that and read that through because that negates everything that I've heard and seen in the press.
Thank you for the information. And that'll be, I assume, put in the record just as something that was passed out to council. Manager summary, any current events that you need to update us on?
Not at this time. I'm still working closely with the Cincinnati Reds, and we'll be bringing information back to council. And we do look for a memo of understanding potentially in front of council on April the 7th.
April the 7th is when we'll be acting on that?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you have one other thing?
Yeah, there was. Mario and I attended a meeting of the commuter rail, and Rick Pilgrim from URL. Don't ask me what URL stands for.
URS.
URS. I mean.
Rick Pilgrim from URS.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know him.
Yes.
And he gave us a presentation on the commuter rail possibilities. It is, if they really got on it, the state could put that commuter rail system in, and we could have commuter rail out here. They didn't sound too positive about trying to come out here. However, the railroad company said, we'd like to take the rail lines that are used the least and start there as a trial. And our rail line coming from downtown Phoenix out to Buckeye is probably the one used least of any rail line. So I suggested that they try that as the first shot to give us started first. I don't think they wanted to hear that because they're interested in the east side, and of course the governor's interested in commuter rail from Phoenix to Tucson. But I think eventually there's going to be enough pressure put on that commuter rail is going to be a reality. And that will be something different than light rail, where you'll get on a train in Buckeye and it'll probably stop in Avondale, Goodyear, and then go all the way downtown without stopping again. So that will complement light rail, and that will complement the buses. So I think that system is coming. At least that's how it would impact our area.
With that, I'll adjourn the work.